Tonight's case is not about secret passages or royal coups, but something colder and more modern. A murder committed with springs, wire, and timing. Poirot and the alibi that was built takes us into a Bloomsbury office where a man appears to have been killed alone behind a locked door at a time when his bitter enemy is seen chatting at a country halt with 3 impeccable witnesses. Inspector chases minutes and clocks. The Crown prepares to argue that half a dozen respectable people were mistaken, and Poirot quietly turns his attention to a match case, a dent, and a letter that was never meant to be read. Only pulled. As always, this story is inspired by the spirit of Agatha Christie and the great Golden Age crime writers. But the plot, characters, and text you're about to hear are entirely our own creation. This episode exists thanks to the listeners who support Nocturnal Tales on Patreon and on Buy Me a Coffee. These long, fully produced mysteries genuinely wouldn't be possible without you. So thank you. If you'd like to help future stories like this come to life, you can join us on Patreon from $2.99 a month or leave a one-off tip on Buy Me a Coffee. Now, settle in as the office clocks tick. The clocks swear to their times, and Poirot shows how a perfect alibi can be the most incriminating thing in the room. Chapter 1. The Platform That Kept the Time. There are places in England where time seems not merely measured, but enforced. A country station is one of them. The benches are scrubbed as though cleanliness were a virtue to be inspected. The porters carry trunks with the solemnity of church wardens. The station clock hangs above the booking office like a magistrate, silent, stern, and always believed. It was under such a clock at Marleigh Halt that I first heard the remark which would haunt me for days. The alibi is perfect. Poirot and I had been persuaded by Poirot naturally that a brief visit to the country would be beneficial. I had imagined brisk walks and honest air. Poirot, on the other hand, finds the mind works best when the body is neither too cold nor too content, and in any case he regards train timetables as other men regard poetry. We arrived early for the up train to London. A thin rain had begun making the platform shine. The little station smelled of damp wool, cold smoke, and that faint medicinal odor one associates with waiting rooms and the seriousness of travel. "Half an hour, Hastings," Poirot observed, consulting his watch with mild irritation. "Half an hour is not nothing. It is sometimes everything." "That's a very Poirot way of putting it," I said, pulling my coat closer. He did not reply. His attention had shifted, quick and quiet, to a movement near the station office. A telegraph boy had come in on a bicycle, breath steaming capiscu. He handed a paper to the station master and waited with the grave importance of youth entrusted with adult affairs. The station master read, stiffened, and then read again, slower. Within moments, 3 people were drawn to him as iron filings to a magnet. The first was a stout gentleman in a tweed overcoat, ruddy-faced, carrying a hunting crop as though he could not quite bear to be without it. The second was a thin woman in a severe hat and a coat cut with uncompromising neatness. The third was a younger man, tidy, pale, and anxious in that earnest way which suggests a solicitor, an accountant, or a man who has spent his life worrying about signatures. They spoke in low voices, but agitation has a way of lifting words to the surface. The stout man said, "Rubbish. They've made a mistake." The woman replied, "It is not a mistake if it is in black and white." The younger man added, "They'll ask when he was here. They'll ask who spoke to him." Poirot drifted nearer. Not intrusively, never that. Merely by existing in the correct place at the correct moment. I followed because if you do not follow Poirot when he does this, you inevitably discover later that he has walked straight into the center of something, and you have missed the beginning. The station master cleared his throat. "If you please, Mrs. Wycliffe, Captain Rook, Mr. Draycott, this message is from London." There's been a murder. A small silence fell, the sort that makes you conscious of dripping eaves and a far-off crow calling across fields. Murder. Captain Rook repeated as though it were an imported disease. In Marleigh, in London, the station master corrected quickly. Bloomsbury area. They say a gentleman, Mr. Felix Harrow, found dead in his office. Mrs. Wycliffe's mouth tightened. And they have arrested Leonard Vane. Mr. Draycott nodded too rapidly. Yes, Leonard Vane. Poirot spoke with the politeness of a man asking for directions. Pardon, monsieur. This Leonard Vane. Why is his name of interest here? Captain Rook turned at once, grateful for an audience, even a Belgian one. Because he was here, he said with blunt certainty. On this platform, Mrs. Wycliffe added. He asked me for a match. Mr. Draycott said. He spoke to me as well. The station master looked faintly relieved that respectable people were willing to say things on record. That is what Inspector, whoever it is, wants to know. The telegram asks whether Vane was seen at Marleigh Halt this afternoon, and at what Temero's eyes lifted very gently to the station clock. And at what time was he seen? A43, said Mr. Draycott instantly. I remember because I was checking the time for the 3:22 up. Mrs. Wycliffe said a little after the quarter. Not much. Captain Rook struck the platform with the tip of his crop. 1:15 precisely. I looked. I was waiting for the train. Pugh nodded once. And how long did he remain? Captain Rook frowned, thinking. Not long. A few minutes. He spoke, then moved off toward the far end. Mrs. Wycliffe said he was calm, not like a man who has. She broke off as though the word murdered tasted unpleasant. Mr. Draycott swallowed. He shook my hand. Poirot's expression did not change, but I have learned that with him, that means very little. He asked softly, What did he say? Captain Rook waved a hand impatiently. Nothing of consequence. Complained about London. Asked after the roads. Ordinary talk. Mrs. Wycliffe said, He asked me for a match. I noticed his case. Silver with a small dent. Mr. Draycott said, He said he must be in town by evening. The station master looked down at the paper again. The message says, Time of death believed between 3:10 and 3:20. Mr. Draycott stared at him. But if we saw Vane at 1:15. That's it, Captain Rook said, a note of triumph creeping in. That's why the alibi is perfect. Poirot's gaze moved from one to the other. The three of them stood by chance or instinct close together. Captain Rook with his hearty confidence, Mrs. Wycliffe with her clipped precision, and Mr. Draycott with his nervous insistence. Poirot said mildly, 3 witnesses, all respectable, all quite certain. Mrs. Wycliffe lifted her chin. I have no intention of being uncertain about what I saw. Captain Rook gave a short laugh. Good God, man. I can tell the time. Mr. Draycott said quickly, It was 1:15, I am sure. At that moment, the distant hum of an approaching train grew along the line, and the platform changed its mood at once. A few passengers gathered their parcels. Someone adjusted gloves. The ordinary life of the railway asserted itself as though it disapproved of drama. Poirot stepped back to my side. Come, Hastings, he said quietly. We go to London to see the office, I asked. But the police, surely they'll handle it. He gave me a look in which patience fought with something sharper. My friend, he said, when a thing is perfect, it is either a miracle or it has been arranged. You think it's arranged by whom? Poirot did not answer that. He did not answer anything that mattered, which is one of his most maddening habits. Instead, he said, Observe the witnesses. They agree very quickly. They hold their certainty like a shield. And the clock. Ah, the clock. Everyone trusts the clock. The train drew in with a rush of steam, the doors opening with their familiar clatter. We took our seats. Through the misted window I could still see the three figures by the station office, now speaking again in low, urgent tones, as if rehearsing what they would say when London came calling. As the carriage jolted and began to move, Poirot murmured almost to himself, "A man lies dead in Bloomsbury. Another man is said to have been here at Marleigh Halt at the very moment it happened, and 3 respectable people are prepared to swear to it." He turned his head slightly, and I saw in his eyes that calm, inexorable light I have come to associate with trouble. "We shall see," said Hercule, "whether time itself will keep their secret." Chapter 2. The Office in Bloomsbury. London was doing what London does best, pretending to be ordinary while something ugly lay just beneath the surface. We left King's Cross in a thin drizzle and took a taxi, through streets that looked scrubbed and respectable, but felt, to my mind, vaguely conspiratorial. Poirot sat very straight, his gloved hands folded, his eyes half-lidded in that manner which fools mistake for drowsiness. "You are thinking," I said. "I am always thinking, Hastings. But yes, today I am thinking with a little more impatience." "And about what exactly?" He gave a small sigh about the English love affair with clocks and character. The station clock would not lie. Captain Rook would not lie. Mrs. Wycliffe is a respectable woman. It is always the same. You trust the object. You trust the label. And then you are astonished when you are deceived. We went first to Scotland Yard because Poirot has friends there, and because Poirot has the irritating habit of being welcomed in places where I should have to wait in corridors. Inspector received us with his usual mixture of relief and complaint. "Well," he said, "if it isn't the little Belgian chap and his faithful shadow, I suppose you've come to tell me you're just in the neighborhood." "We are always in the neighborhood of crime, my friend," Poirot replied pleasantly. "It is a kind of magnet." Grunted, but he looked tired enough to be grateful for any magnet that worked. "It's a nasty one," he said, waving us into a chair. "Office in Bloomsbury, door locked. Victim found at 4 by his secretary. Dead likely since just after 3. "Name?" Poirot asked. "Felix Harrow, moneyman. Investments, loans, that sort. Not a big public name, but plenty of private enemies." "And the suspect?" "Leonard Vane," said young fellow worked for Harrow once, left under a cloud. There was a row about a ledger, missing entries, accusations. Harrow threatened to ruin him. Vane threatened back. The usual. "And yet," Poirot said softly, "he was seen at Marleigh Halt at a Court 3. Japp's mouth twisted. "That's the trouble. 3 witnesses swear it, respectable as you like. Captain, church lady, young solicitor, they've already given statements by wire. If they're right, Vane can't be our man." "If they are right," Poirot repeated as though the phrase had a taste. Leaned forward. "Here's what I know. Harrow was alive at 3:00. Spoke to a client on the telephone. At 3:10, his clear brings in a letter. Harrow tells him to leave it on the desk. After that, no one sees him alive. At 4, the secretary comes back from a meeting, finds the door locked, no answer, fetches the caretaker. They force it. Harrow's dead at his desk. Knife wound, 1 clean thrust." "A professional?" I asked. Shook his head. "Not like the Continent, if that's what you mean. Could be anyone who knew where to put a blade. There's no struggle, no mess. It's controlled." Pugh's eyes were on now, intent. The door was locked from the inside. "Yes. And the key on the inside of the lock and the window shut, but not nailed. 2nd floor, not street level, but not the Tower of London either." Poirot rose. "Then we go to Bloomsbury. Stood 2. I'll take you, but I'm warning you. If you start waving your hands and talking about mustaches, my men will laugh." They will laugh. Poirot agreed. But later, perhaps they will stop. The office was in one of those sober Bloomsbury buildings that look as though they were designed to discourage joy. Harrow and Company occupied the second floor. A brass plaque at the entrance shone with the cheerless pride of money that has never been warm. Inside, the air smelled of paper, ink, and the faint sharpness of furniture polish. Clerks bent over ledgers with the expression of men in prison who have learned to like their routines. Harrow's room was at the end of a corridor. Japp's men had already done what they call taking it in, which is to say they had made the place feel as though it belonged to the police rather than the dead. Felix Harrow sat slumped forward at his desk, as if he had nodded off while working, and never quite recovered the habit. His face had already taken on that horrible settled look death gives, like a decision that cannot be appealed. One hand lay palm up on the blot, the other had slipped to his lap. Poirot approached, not with drama, but with care, as if the room might break if he walked too heavily. He did not touch the body. He did not, as I might have expected, begin at once with the wound. Instead, he looked at the desk. There were papers arranged in neat piles, a pen precisely placed, a small paper weight. On the corner sat a silver matchcase, polished, handsome, and with a small dent. I felt a ridiculous little jolt, as though the station platform had suddenly reappeared inside the office. Poirot's eyes, I saw, had fixed on the matchcase too. But he said nothing. He simply let his gaze travel. On the desk also lay an envelope opened with a single sheet half drawn out as though Harrow had intended to read it and had been interrupted. "What's that?" I asked. "Letter brought in at 3:10, said. "Clark says so." Pugh looked at the envelope without lifting it. "And you have read it?" "Of course," said a shade defensive. "It's not poetry. It's a demand. Money threats the usual. Pay by Friday or that kind of thing." Pugh nodded once thoughtfully, then moved to the door. He inspected the lock, the key, the frame. He crouched awkwardly for him and studied the gap beneath the door, the scuff marks on the floorboard where feet had turned. Then very quietly he asked, "Who has entered this room since the body was found?" Counted on his fingers. "Secretary, caretaker, 2 constables, the doctor, myself, a photographer, and now you." Poirot's mouth tightened just a fraction. "So many, and yet you call it preserved," bristled. "We did what we could." Poirot softened immediately. Yes. It is not your fault. The English do not like to believe that rooms can lie." He turned to the secretary, a pale woman with reined eyes who stood rigidly as though holding herself together by will. "Mademoiselle," Poirot said gently, "at what time did you last see Mr. Harrow alive?" "Just before 3, she whispered. "He told me to go to a meeting. I left at 5 minutes to 3. He was quite normal. And when you returned at 4, the corridor was empty. I knocked. No answer. I tried the handle. It was locked. That's when I fetched Mr. Pomeroy, the caretaker." Poirot nodded. "And Mr. Harrow, did he ever lock his door when he was alone?" The secretary hesitated. "Sometimes if he was on a private call or if Mr. Vane had been in. He didn't like disturbances." Poirot thanked her and turned back to the desk, his eyes returning once more to the silver matchcase. "Curious," he murmured. "What's curious?" demanded. Poirot did not answer directly. He asked instead, very calmly, "Inspector, at what exact time do you say Mr. Harrow was killed?" Frowned. "Between 3:10 and 3:20, doctor says. Could be a bit either way." Poirot's gaze lifted to the wall clock in the office. It ticked steadily, confident, authoritative, just like the station clock at Marleigh Halt. Poirot looked at it for a long moment. Then he said very softly, as if to himself, 2 clocks, Hastings, and 3 witnesses who worshipped the minute. He turned away from the dead man's desk. "Come," he said. "We go back to the yard, and then, if you please, we go to Marleigh Halt again. I want to look not at the people, but at the time." Chapter 3. The clock that everyone trusted. We returned to Marleigh Halt the next morning, not as travelers, but as men who had business with a place that wished to remain innocent. The rain had gone. The air was sharp and clean. The platform board still held a faint dark stain where yesterday's damp had soaked in. Inspector came with us, grumbling about wasted time and country air. But I could see he was curious in spite of himself. A case that behaved properly is a comfort to a policeman. A case with a perfect alibi is an insult. The station master received us with a stiff cap touch that was half respect and half defensiveness. "Inspector," he said, "I've done nothing but answer questions since that wire. It's upset the town something terrible." Poirot's manner was as soothing as a well-made cup of tea. "We wish only to understand, monsieur. You will help us." The station master led us to his little office where the same telegram, now copied and recopied, seemed to have infected every surface. Poirot asked for the station log, the timetable, and the book in which tickets were noted for the day. The station master produced them with the reluctance of a man handing over his family Bible. While examined the paperwork, Poirot stepped out again onto the platform and stood directly under the clock. It was an ordinary clock as these things go. Large face, black hands, Roman numerals, hung high above the booking window, so that no one could plead ignorance of the time. It ticked with a firm, steady confidence, like a man who never doubts his own opinion. Poirot's gaze moved from the clock to the length of the platform to the footbridge at the far end, to the hedge beyond, and then back again to the clock. "You admire it?" I asked. "I distrust it," he replied, heard that and snorted. "It's a clock, Poirot. It says what time it is," Poirot said gently. "It says what time it believes it is." The station master bridled. "Our clock is set by the railway, sir. It's checked regular." "By whom?" Poirot asked. The man hesitated. "Mr. Bracken, the clock repairer from Marleigh Town, comes once a month." Poirot nodded. "And yesterday? At what time was it last checked?" The station master frowned, thinking. "Not yesterday. Last week, I should say." Poirot turned to the station bench nearest the office, the same bench upon which I now noticed the stout Captain Rook had likely sat while waiting with his crop across his knees. "Let us be exact," Poirot said. "At the moment the witnesses say they spoke with Leonard Vane, where were they standing? Show me." It is a curious thing how reluctant people become when asked to reenact their certainty. The station master called the 3 witnesses by telephone, and by late morning they had arrived, each in the same armor of respectability. Captain Rook came first, cheeks red, mustache bristling, convinced that the affair was an inconvenience to the county, and therefore must be quickly finished. Mrs. Wycliffe arrived next, thin and composed, a woman who would rather face an accusation than admit confusion. Mr. Draycott came last, neat and pale, his eyes darting about as though the platform might produce a policeman from behind the luggage trolley. Poirot greeted them as if he were receiving guests at a luncheon, and then without raising his voice began to separate them. "Captain," he said, "you will be so kind as to walk with Inspector to the far end of the platform. Madame, you will remain here with me. Mr. Draycott Hastings will speak with you by the bookstore." Opened his mouth to protest being turned into an errand boy, but Poirot's look stopped him. We spread out like pieces on a board. Poirot asked Mrs. Wycliffe to stand precisely where she had stood yesterday. "Here," she said at once, taking a position near the bench, close enough to the office door to feel important. He came from that direction toward the footbridge, and he asked you for a match. Yes, quite politely. What did you do? I gave him one, she said crisply. He lit his cigarette. He thanked me. That was all. And you noticed his case? I did. Pooh's eyes remained mild. Describe it again, if you please. Silver. Good quality. A small dent on the corner. Which corner? Mrs. Wycliffe frowned, annoyed at the question's pettiness. The lower right as I looked at it. Poirot nodded as though this settled something. And you are certain of the time? I looked up at the clock, she said, lifting her chin toward it. 3:15. Did you look at a watch? I have no need to. The station clock is perfectly clear. Poirot said nothing more. He simply let the silence do its work. Mrs. Wycliffe's composure did not crack, but her eyes flicked once very quickly to the office door. At the bookstore, Mr. Draycott spoke as he had before with anxious precision. It was 1:15, he repeated. I remember because I was waiting for the 3:22 and because I had an appointment in London and was calculating. Where exactly were you? I asked. Here by the papers. I bought a Financial Times. Did you see Vane come onto the platform? Yes, from the footbridge. Did he buy a ticket? Draycott hesitated. I don't think so. I didn't see him at the window. Did he have a bag? No. Did he seem wet as though he'd walked through rain? It wasn't raining then, Draycott said quickly. Too quickly, then corrected himself. Or at least not much. What did he say to you? He swallowed. Only that he had business in London. He asked after my father. He knew him slightly. He was pleasant. Did you look at your watch? Yes, he said, grateful. Yes, I did. I checked it before the train. And what time did your watch show? 1:15, he said again, then faltered. Or just after. I made a note of that. Poirot would be interested. At the far end, I could hear Captain Rook's voice rising with irritation. You fellows act as if I'm the criminal. I told you he was here. Japp's tone was flat. I'm asking where you stood, Captain, not whether you're offended. When we gathered again, Poirot listened to my brief report with a little nod, then turned to, And you, Inspector? Looked grim. Captain says he stood by the edge near the signal box because he likes to see the train come in. He says he looked at the clock because he was impatient. He swears it was 1:15. He swears Vane spoke to him for 2 minutes. He swears he would stake his pension on it. Poirot's expression did not change. And did he look at his own watch? Jerked his chin. He says he did not need to. Same as the lady. Poirot folded his hands. 3 people, he said softly, who rely on one thing. The clock, I said. The clock, said Poirot. He walked to the booking window and asked the station master to show him the ticket book. The station master complied, sweating faintly. Poirot ran a finger down the entries, murmuring the names, under his breath. He paused once, then again. Yesterday, he said. How many tickets were sold for the 3:22 up train? 6, the station master replied. Poirot looked at him. And how many people boarded? The station master blinked. 6. Pooh did not smile. So, no one boarded without a ticket from this station. Japp's brows drew together. You mean Vane didn't travel from here? I mean, Poirot corrected gently, that it is not proved he traveled from here. He stepped out again and glanced along the track. Tell me, he said to the station master, is there another way to reach this platform besides the road and the footbridge? The station master looked surprised. Well, there's the service gate at the far end for railway men, but it's kept locked. Always, mostly. Poirot's eyes drifted to the gate, an iron thing half hidden by a hedge. From where we stood, it looked quite harmless. And the footbridge, Poirot continued. If a man came from the town on foot, he would cross it and come down there. Yes, And if he came from the fields? The station master shifted. There's a path. Farmers use it. But it's not official. Poirot nodded as though that was precisely what he wanted. Mrs. Wycliffe said sharply, "Are you suggesting he climbed fences like a Poirot?" Turned to her with perfect courtesy. "I suggest nothing, madam. I ask questions." He lifted his head and looked once more at the clock. Then, with the calm of a man choosing a pastry, he said, "Inspector, we will do two things. First, we will see Mr. Bracken, the clock repairer. Second, we will compare this clock with another, one that has no reason to please anyone." Stared. "And if the clock's wrong?" Poirot's voice was mild, but there was iron in it. "Then we have not 3 witnesses and a perfect alibi. We have 3 witnesses and a very obedient story." As we left the platform, I could not help turning back. The clock sat above the office, ticking steadily, unquestioned, as it had ticked through 100 ordinary afternoons. And yet for the first time it did not look to me like a guardian of order. It looked like an accomplice. Before we continue, one quick word for those who'd like to support Nocturnal Tales. The strongest way to do that is Patreon. On Patreon, we publish 4 stories every week. Here on YouTube, you receive 2. Patreon also gets episodes a couple of days earlier, and some cases are kept exclusive in the private archive. If you want to join, you can choose your tier. Early Access Explorer, $2.99 per month. Ad-free listening plus early access before the public release. The Writing Table, $12 per month. Vote on themes and get behind-the-scenes notes, character sheets, inspirations, and alternate endings. The Archive Society, $30 per month. Everything above, plus quarterly ebook anthologies in PDF and EPUB, and your name printed in the archive credits. The Mystery Patron, $65 per month, limited. Submit ideas. Selected ideas become episodes, with dedication credit and early private access. If you prefer a one-time show of support, you can also use Buy Me a Coffee. And if you want to support the show, but can't do Patreon or a donation, you can still help by listening on Spotify, where the show is monetized. Following the channel and playing episodes directly supports the project. All right, back to the story. Chapter 4. The Man Who Set the Minutes. Mr. Bracken lived behind his shop in Marleytown in rooms that smelled of brass filings and clock oil. The sign above the door read Bracken, Watchmaker, and in the window a regiment of little timepieces stood to attention, all insisting on slightly different versions of the same moment. He was a thin, exact man, with steel spectacles, and the air of someone who considers carelessness a personal insult. When the station master introduced us, Mr. Bracken wiped his hands on a cloth that was already perfectly clean. "The station clock," he said at once before Poirot had even opened his mouth. "Is it stopping again?" "It is not stopping," Poirot assured him pleasantly. "It is, how do you say, convincing the world." Mr. Bracken blinked. "I don't follow." Poirot bowed. "Then we will be simple. You check the clock at Marleigh Halt." "Once a month," Bracken said. "More if the station master asks." "And when you check it," Poirot continued, "you set it by what?" "By the post office time," Bracken replied as though it were obvious. "The telephone time official. Shifted. Telephone time." Bracken looked at him with mild disdain. "You ring the exchange. You ask for the time. They give it. It is maintained from Greenwich. Reliable." Poirot's eyes narrowed a fraction. "So you do not set it by your own watch?" "My watch is set by the same source," Bracken said crisply. "Daily." Poirot nodded. "Yesterday at 3:15, would the clock at Marleigh Halt have been correct?" "Unless someone tampered with it after my last visit," Bracken said. "And there is no reason." Pooh's hand lifted. "Ah, no reason. It is a phrase I do not like. Tell me, monsieur, when was your last visit?" Bracken consulted a little notebook produced as quickly as a weapon. 8 days ago, Wednesday, 10:40 a.m. I wrote it down. And you found the clock. 2 minutes fast, Bracken said almost with satisfaction. I corrected it. Made a small sound. 2 minutes fast, and the station master didn't notice. Bracken's mouth tightened. Station masters notice trains, not minutes. They assume the clock is right because it hangs there. Poirot's gaze drifted to the row of watches in the window. And after you corrected it, it would have been exact. Yes. Poirot's voice remained mild. If someone wished, could they alter it? Bracken stiffened. It is in a locked case. Locked by a key, Poirot said. The station master has it. And does he ever lend it? Not to my knowledge. Poirot let the matter rest as though it bored him. Then he asked as casually as one might ask after tea. Miss Bracken, do you know a man named Leonard Vane? The watchmaker frowned. No. And Felix Harrow? No. Mrs. Wycliffe's name. Poirot continued. Bracken hesitated. Mrs. Wycliffe. Yes. She has brought watches for repair. A good customer, very particular. And Captain Rook? No. And Mr. Draycott? Bracken shook his head again. Poirot thanked him and turned to leave, but at the door he paused. One more thing. If the station clock were wrong, say by 2 or 3 minutes, would you know? Bracken looked offended. I would know when next I checked. But until then, Poirot said softly, everyone would swear by it. Outside rubbed his chin. So the clock's official enough. Not likely the trick. Poirot did not reply at once. He walked a little way in silence, then stopped before a small public telephone box standing beside the chemist's. He opened the door and stepped in. Poirot, what? I began. He held up a finger. He rang the operator, asked for the correct time, and listened. When he stepped out again, he consulted his own watch, adjusted it by a hair, and looked at me. The post office time says 11:17, he remarked. And my watch said 11:11, Poirot replied. Now it says 11:17, snorted. You're chasing seconds. Puss' eyes were thoughtful. I am chasing belief, Inspector. A perfect alibi is not made of facts. It is made of things people agree to trust. We went next to the station again. The station master produced the key to the clock case reluctantly, like a man handing over his dignity. Poirot opened the little glass door, examined the face and hands, without touching them, and then looked behind the clock. There is dust, he said. So, demanded. And here, Poirot continued, a smear as if a finger has been. The station master flushed. I dust it sometimes. Poirot smiled politely. Of course. He closed the case and stepped back, considering the clock as if it were a portrait. Inspector, he said at last, I should like to see the witnesses again separately, not to ask what they saw, but to ask what they did before they saw it. Stared. That's your line. Poirot nodded. Because if 3 people remember the same minute with such pride, it is often because they have rehearsed the minute, perhaps even before the event. And if they have rehearsed, then someone has given them a reason. As we walked along the platform, the up train thundered past without stopping, and its wind tugged at coats and thoughts alike. I glanced at the clock once more. It looked as it had yesterday, calm, certain, righteous. But now I could not help imagining hands, quiet, confident hands, moving those minutes to where they were needed. And somewhere in Bloomsbury a silver match case lay with its dented corner, waiting for its turn to speak. Chapter 5. The 3 Honest People. Poirot's method, when it pleases him, is to ask questions that sound harmless until you realize too late that you have answered the real one. He insisted the witnesses come again to Marleigh Halt, but this time he would not allow them to cluster together near the station office. He separated them with the quiet firmness of a man rearranging furniture. "Captain Rook, Inspector will walk with you to the footbridge. Mrs. Wycliffe, you will sit here with me by the bench. Monsieur Draycott Hastings will take you to the bookstore again, and please speak only to the person who questions you." There was a ripple of indignation at being managed. Yet they obeyed, perhaps because Japp's presence made it official, perhaps because they were, in their different ways, used to authority. I began with Mr. Draycott. He looked as though he had not slept well. "You're quite sure it was Leonard Vane?" I asked. "Of course," he said quickly. "I told you he came to my office last month." "What business?" Draycott's lips compressed. "A contract dispute. A small matter." "Small matters rarely go to solicitors," I said. He colored. "He wanted advice, that's all." "And yesterday," I continued. "Where were you before you arrived at the station?" "At my office," he replied. "In town?" "In Marleigh Town?" "Yes." "At what time did you leave?" He hesitated. "Just after 3. "Just after 3, I repeated. "On foot? By bicycle? In a car?" "On foot." "From your office to the station is what?" 10 minutes at a brisk walk, about that." "And yet you are certain you arrived in time to see a man at Court 3 swallowed?" "Yes." "Did you speak to anyone on the way? Stop anywhere?" "No." "What did you do at the station besides speak to Vane?" "I bought a paper." "With what?" I asked. "Because I have learned from Poirot that money makes excellent truth serum." He blinked. "A shilling and your change. A few pence." I watched him closely. He was trying very hard to be normal. That in itself is suspicious. "What time did you reach home last night?" I asked abruptly. His head jerked. "Last night?" "Yes." He looked startled, then cautious. "About 7. "And you were in London afterward?" "No," he said too quickly. "No. Why would I?" I let it drop, though his anxiety lingered like a bad smell. When we rejoined Poirot, I found him with Mrs. Wycliffe. She sat very straight on the bench, gloves folded, face composed. "Madame," Pooh was saying, "you are a woman of habits." "I suppose," she replied coolly, like most sensible people. "Exactly. So tell me, yesterday before 3 hours, what did you do?" "I had luncheon at 1 soir. I wrote letters. I walked to the station at 3 to meet my niece's parcel." Poirot's tone remained mild. "Your niece's parcel?" "A hat box. She sends things down from London." "And it arrives at what time?" "The 3:22, she said." Poirot's eyebrows lifted a fraction. "So you arrived early." "Of course one does not arrive late." "And at what point did you notice the man you call Leonard Vane?" "As I came onto the platform," she said crisply. "He was near the far end." Poirot nodded. "And you spoke first?" "No. He approached me because he wanted a match." "Yes." Poirot leaned slightly forward. "And if you had not had a match," Mrs. Wycliffe's eyes flashed irritation, "then he would have asked someone else." "Quite," Poirot said. "And you? Did you think it strange that a man with a silver match ace should ask you for one?" She stiffened. His cigarette was unlit. Poirot smiled faintly. "Yes, but a match case is not empty of matches, is it not? Unless it is, how do you say, only for display?" Mrs. Wycliffe did not reply at once. Then she said very controlled, "He had lost his." Poirot nodded as if that satisfied him completely and asked gently, "And after he thanked you, what did you do?" "I waited for the train." "And you saw him again?" "No." Poirot's gaze moved to her gloves. "Your hands, madame. They tremble a little today." "They do not," she snapped, and then worse forced them still. Poirot murmured an apology and rose as though he were done. But as we walked away, he said softly to me, "She is angry, Hastings, not afraid. Anger is often the more useful emotion. Inspector returned from the footbridge with Captain Rook. The captain looked offended at having been questioned like a naughty schoolboy. "This is ridiculous," he boomed. "I was at the station waiting for the 3:22. The fellow Vane was there at quarter. That's the end of it." Pooh's voice was gentle. "Captain, yesterday, before you came to the station, where were you?" "At my house." "And at what time did you leave?" "About 3. About repeated." Rook bristled. "Must you have the seconds?" "I left at about 3, walked down the lane, 10 minutes and arrived." "You were alone?" "Of course." Poirot's eyes were mild. "And you did not meet anyone?" Rook hesitated, then shrugged. "Possibly a farm lad, possibly no one." "I didn't take roll call." Pooh nodded as if he had expected that answer. "Captain, you are a man who prides himself on his eyesight." "Damn right." "And on your judgment." "Yes." Poirot's voice remained polite. "Then tell me, what color were Mr. Vane's eyes?" The captain stared momentarily wrong-footed. "Eyes brown, I suppose." "Suppose?" Poirot echoed softly, gave a short, amused snort. Mrs. Wycliffe's mouth tightened. Dracot looked ill. Poirot continued smoothly. "And his hands? Were they rough or smooth?" Rook scowled. "How should I know?" "I'm not a you shook his hand," Poirot prompted. "Well, yes, briefly. And yet you do not know if it was a hand that writes all day or a hand that carries sacks." Rook flushed. "You're splitting hairs." "No," said Pooh, still mild. "I am splitting certainty." We returned to London that evening. Had insisted on it. There were inquiries to make, men to see, paperwork to suffer. Poirot agreed, but I could tell he had already taken a decision. At the yard, we were met by a younger officer with an urgent expression. He handed a note. "They've done it," said Reading. "They're charging Vane in the morning. Crown wants him held." The Marleigh statements are confused. Dracot's face, which had followed us into London at Japp's request, went the color of paper. "That's impossible," he whispered. "But if they say we're confused," Poirot's eyes lifted. "Monsieur Dracot," he said very quietly, "are you confused?" Dracot opened his mouth, then closed it. His gaze flicked fast to Mrs. Wycliffe and away again. Poirot turned to Inspector. "Tomorrow morning, before they charge, take me again to Harrow's office. I wish to see 2 things." Frowned. "We've been over it." Poirot's voice was calm. "I wish to see the clocks again, and I wish to see the letter that arrived at 3:10. He paused, then added as though it were an afterthought. "And if it is possible, I should like to speak to the caretaker alone." Looked at him hard. "You've got something." Poirot's expression was polite and unreadable. "I have a shape. Tomorrow I hope I will have the detail that makes the shape a truth." That night in our rooms, Poirot sat at the small table and wrote a few notes with maddening neatness. He arranged his papers. He adjusted his cuff. "You believe the 3 witnesses are lying?" I said. Poirot did not look up. "I believe 3 honest people can tell the truth and still be wrong." "How?" He placed his pen down precisely. "Because," he said softly, "someone has taught them what to remember." He met my eyes. "And tomorrow, Hastings, we shall discover whether the minute was moved or whether the man was." Chapter 6. The Alibi That Was Built. We were back in Harrow's Bloomsbury office before 9, while the building still smelled of yesterday's polish and today's fear. Inspector was impatient, the caretaker offended, and the clerks watching us as though we might begin rearranging the furniture into a gallows. Poole, as usual, behaved as if he had all the time in England. "Bring me the letter," he said. Produced it from an evidence folder, the opened envelope, and the single sheet half drawn out on Harrow's desk. Pooh did not read the words. He examined the paper, its folds, its edge, the thickness at the corner. Then he asked quietly, "The clerk who delivered it at 3:10. Where is he?" A young man was brought in, pale and affronted. "You placed it on the desk?" Pooh asked. "Yes, sir." "Did Mr. Harrow touch it while you were in the room?" "No, sir. He told me to leave it." Poirot nodded. "And you noticed nothing else? Nothing unusual?" The clerk hesitated. "Only Mr. Harrow's match case was on the desk. That's all." "The silver one," Poirot murmured, and his eyes flicked to the small dent. He turned to the caretaker. "Monsieur Pomeroy, you forced the door at 4. "Yes. With what?" "A shoulder and a crowbar," the caretaker said, defensive. "The lady was in a state." "And when you forced it," Poirot continued, "the key was in the inside lock." "Yes. Yes." Poirot's voice remained mild. "Did you touch it?" "No, sir." "Did anyone touch it?" "Shifted. We all saw it. I can't swear no one brushed it." Pooh looked down at the lock and the doorframe. "Observe, Hastings," he said softly. "A strong man forces a locked door. It leaves a story. Splinters, stress, marks. Here there are marks from forcing." "Yes. But the lock itself is tidy." Frowned. Meaning that the lock is not the hero of this drama," said Poirot. "It is only scenery." He moved to Harrow's desk. "Now we come to the point," he said, and for the first time his voice sharpened. Not louder, but harder. "Inspector, you have pursued minutes. You have pursued clocks. You have pursued witnesses. All very English. But the killer pursued only one thing, that the killing should occur at a time when another man could be seen elsewhere." Stared at him. So the alibi was arranged by the killer. Exactly. Poirot said not to protect the suspect, to taunt the police and to confuse the facts, to make the case look impossible until the Crown becomes stubborn and says the witnesses are mistaken. He pointed at the letter. "This was delivered at 3:10. "Yes," said. "And the time of death is between 3:10 and 3:20. Very convenient." He placed 2 fingers gently on the envelope, not touching it more than necessary, and tilted it to the light. At the lower corner, he said, "There is a pinhole, very small, and here, along the inside flap, there is a faint smear, not ink, not blood." He raised his eyes to the caretaker. "Monsieur Pomeroy, when you oil locks and hinges, what do you use?" The caretaker blinked. "Clock oil, same as for, well, clocks." Poirot nodded. "Thank you." He looked to now. "Inspector, please open the right-hand drawer of the desk." Hesitated, then did it. The drawer slid out smoothly. Poirot leaned in. "Look under the lip. Feel it." Jab's fingers moved, then paused. "There's something." He drew out a tiny coil of thin wire, almost invisible unless you knew to search. Poirot's eyes did not leave the drawer. "And here," he continued, a small metal catch filed down, and behind it, ah. He reached very carefully and lifted a false wooden strip that sat flush against the drawer's inner frame. Beneath it was a narrow spring mechanism, the sort one might find in a cheap novelty toy, except this was strong, and it held a thin, needle-like blade aligned toward the place where a man seated at the desk would lean. I felt my stomach turn, swore under his breath. "A booby trap." "Precisely," said Poirot. "Not poison, not a gun, a silent thrust, one clean wound, no struggle, no intruder. And the door can be locked from the inside because Mr. Harrow, who liked privacy, often locked it himself." Stared. "But how? Does it trigger?" Poirot lifted the envelope with a pen, never using his fingers, and showed the corner. The wire was threaded through this pinhole, fixed with a touch of oil to make it slide. The other end ran down under the blotter into the drawer mechanism. When Mr. Harrow pulled the letter free, just an ordinary movement, he drew the wire. The catch released. The spring drove the blade, and Mr. Harrow died at his desk, killed by a letter that was not a letter. The room was very quiet. Then said slowly, "And the suspect, Vane, was at Marleigh Halt when it happened?" Poirot nodded. "Yes, that is why the alibi is perfect. It is genuine. It is also part of the murder." Turned abrupt. "All right. Who had access to this desk long enough to fit that mechanism?" Poirot's gaze moved to the match case, then to the dent again. "Mizzy Harrow was particular," Poirot said. "His desk was kept in order. Not many would dare. But one man had a reason to be alone here, to threaten, to rummage, to inspect, and to leave, behind a story of hatred. He looked at Leonard Vane. Vane arrived from the yard under guard, a young man with the taut look of someone who has spent too long being treated as guilty. He met Poirot's eyes with defiance and exhaustion. So he said bitterly, "They found another way to ignore my alibi." Pooh spoke gently. "Nom, I accept it entirely." Vane blinked. "What?" "I believe you were at Marleigh Halt at 3:15, Poirot continued. "I believe 3 respectable people saw you. I believe you spoke to them on purpose so that you would be seen." Vane's jaw tightened. "I didn't do it. I did not say you stabbed Mr. Harrow with your hand," Pooh replied. "I said you murdered him." Vane's eyes flicked involuntarily to the desk. Poirot's voice remained calm. "You built the weapon into the drawer. You prepared the wire through the envelope. You ensured the letter would arrive at 3:10. You ensured Mr. Harrow would pull it out quickly because the letter threatened him. And then you left London calmly to be seen in the country at the time the trap would spring. Stepped forward. We can't hang a man on clever talk." Poirot. Pooh nodded. "Of course not. So let us be practical." He turned to the caretaker. "Monsieur Pomeroy. Last week. Did Mr. Vane come to this office?" The caretaker hesitated, then glanced at he did, said Mr. Harrow sent for him. He waited while the secretary went for tea. He was alone in here a bit. Vane snapped. "That's a lie." Poirot continued as if he had not heard. "And did he ask you for anything?" The caretaker swallowed. "He asked if I had oil, said his watch was sticking. I gave him a little bottle." Poirot looked at clock oil, the smear in the envelope. "It slides the wire without tearing paper." Japp's face hardened. Poirot added, "And when you arrested him, you found on him a small coil of thin wire." "Yes." Japp's eyes narrowed. "We did. We logged it as rubbish. Wire from a parcel. It is the same gauge," Poirot said quietly, "as the wire in this desk." Vane's breathing had changed. He was not angry now. He was thinking fast, desperate, like a man watching a door close. Poirot's voice softened, almost sad. "You hated Harrow. He ruined you. He humiliated you. But you did not want to fight. You wanted elegance. You wanted to make the police look foolish. You wanted your perfect alibi to be the headline." Vane's mouth worked. Then very low he said, "It was supposed to be justice is not a spring blade in a desk," said Poirot. And for once there was no indulgence in him at all, only a cold clarity. It is only murder with vanity. Vane's shoulders sagged. The defiance left him like air from a punctured tire. "I didn't think they'd charge me anyway," he muttered. "I thought the witnesses would stop it." Japp's eyes flashed. "And if we'd let you go, you'd have smiled at us from the papers." Vane did not answer. He looked at the desk as if seeing it for the first time as a coffin rather than a triumph. Poirot stepped back. "So," he said quietly, "they was perfect. And that is why it was made. Signaled to the constables. Vane was taken away." As we left Bloomsbury, I found myself looking up at the office clock again. It ticked steadily, innocent as ever. Poirot glanced at it once and then away. "You see, Hastings," he said, "it was never the clock that lied. It was the man who understood how much other men love to believe the clock. Thank you for listening all the way to the end of Poirot and the alibi that was built in the finish. There was nothing supernatural about Harrow's locked room. Only a spring hidden in a drawer, a wire threaded through an envelope, and a young man who thought that if the clock and 3 witnesses cleared him, the manner of killing somehow became noble. Poirot, as ever, refuses to be dazzled by an alibi. He follows the oil smear, the dented match case, the rubbish coil of wire, and shows that the time of death was never the puzzle. The real trick was psychological, to make the police love the time so much they'd stop looking at the hand that built it. If this kind of case spoke to you, the mechanical murder, the weapon built into the furniture, the alibi that turns out to be Exhibit A, let us know in the comments. Would you like more stories where Poirot dismantles impossible alibis and elegant locked rooms? Or should we drag him back out into the wider world again, where politics and crowds muddy the tidy lines? Your feedback genuinely shapes what we write next, and which mysteries make it to the channel. If you'd like to help keep these long mysteries coming, we do have a Patreon, where we can explore more of these cases in depth, and a Buy Me a Coffee page if you prefer a one-off tip when a particular story hits home. All the links are in the description. For now, thank you again for staying with us to the last turn of the key. Until the next case, be wary of anyone who boasts about a perfect alibi. Remember that clocks only tell you when something happened, not who prepared it. And trust Poirot when he says, "It is never the time that lies, but the man who knows exactly how much you want to believe it."